What do a toilet seat cover, a Wall Street banker, and a discarded Diet Coke bottle have in common? The answer is probably hanging in your closet right now. I am talking about fleece. For decades, this fuzzy fabric was the definition of uncool. It is the only garment in history that started its life as garbage, saved a dying textile town, and then accidentally created the finance bro aesthetic. So, how did a fabric invented to cover toilet seats end up conquering the world? And is it saving the planet or quietly destroying it? Welcome to Behind the Seams. Let's unzip the truth. Stop for a second and look at your closet. Push aside the denim, ignore the cotton t-shirts, and find that one item that feels different. It's soft, it's fuzzy. If you rub it against a balloon, it generates enough static electricity to jumpstart a small car. And let's be honest, it probably has a few burn marks from a campfire in 2014. For decades, this fabric was the punchline of the fashion world. It was the official uniform of substitute teachers, birdwatchers, and dads who drive beige Volvos. It was uncool. It was lumpy. It was practical to a fault. But look around today. That same fuzzy fabric is walking down the runway at Paris Fashion Week. It is selling for thousands of dollars on resale sites. It has become the tribal armor of Wall Street bankers and the holy grail of hypebeasts in Tokyo. It is arguably the most important textile innovation since the zipper. But here is the thing that should keep you up at night. This cozy, comforting material isn't natural. It didn't grow on a sheep. It wasn't spun from cotton. It is made from trash, literally. It is very likely the only garment you own that started its life as a discarded Diet Coke bottle. So, how did a fabric that was originally designed to cover toilet seats end up conquering the world? How did a group of dirtbag climbers accidentally create the Midtown Uniform? And how is this eco-friendly miracle simultaneously saving the planet and quietly destroying it? Put on your hiking boots. We are going deep. To understand why fleece is such a miracle, we have to go back to a time when staying warm meant being miserable. Let's travel back to the 1950s. Imagine you are a mountaineer. You are hanging off the side of a cliff in Yosemite or the Alps. The wind is howling, the temperature is dropping, and what are you wearing? You are wearing wool. Heavy, itchy, scratchy wool. For thousands of years, wool was the only game in town. And don't get me wrong, nature is smart. Wool is incredible, but old school, unprocessed wool had a fatal flaw. It hated water. If you have ever smelled a wet dog in a warm car, you know the smell of wet wool. But the smell wasn't the problem. The weight was. When wool gets wet, it absorbs water like a sponge. A sweater that weighed 2 pounds dry could weigh 10 pounds wet. Now, imagine sweating in that sweater. You climb hard, you sweat, the wool soaks it up. Then you stop moving. The temperature drops. That wet, heavy blanket against your skin starts to freeze. In the climbing world, this was a legitimate death sentence. It was a recipe for hypothermia. Fashion back then wasn't about drip or aesthetics. It was a binary choice. Stay dry or die. The world was desperate for something better, but nobody knew where to look. Enter Yvon Chouinard. Today you might know him as the billionaire philosopher who gave his entire company away to fight climate change. But in the 1970s, he was a dirtbag. And I say that with respect. He was a 5-foot-nothing blacksmith who lived in his car, ate cat food to save money, and spent every waking hour climbing rocks. He founded a tiny company called Patagonia. At the time, they mostly sold climbing hardware, pitons and carabiners. But Yvon had a hatred for wool. He wanted a fabric that acted like fur. Think about it. When a bear gets wet, it shakes off and it's dry. Why couldn't humans do that? He started hunting for synthetic materials. He looked at everything, and eventually, he found inspiration in the most unglamorous place you can possibly imagine, the toilet. In the 70s, there was a cheap, nasty fabric called polyester pile. If you are too young to remember this, consider yourself lucky. It was used primarily for two things: cheap carpeting in bowling alleys and those fuzzy covers people used to put on toilet seats. It was ugly. It was prone to pilling. It looked like plastic. But Yvon noticed something. It was hydrophobic. That is a fancy way of saying it hated water. You could soak it, wring it out, and it would be dry in minutes. Yvon had a crazy idea. He bought a bolt of this toilet seat fabric, sewed it into a crude sweater, and took it into the mountains. He looked ridiculous, but he was warm, and he was dry. But having a prototype is one thing. Mass producing it is another. Yvon took his idea to a textile mill in Lawrence, Massachusetts, called Malden Mills. This is where the story gets cinematic. Malden Mills was run by a man named Aaron Feuerstein. In the 70s, American manufacturing was dying. Factories were closing, jobs were moving overseas. Malden Mills was on the brink of bankruptcy. They had been making fake fur coats, and the market had crashed. When a short, scruffy climber walked in and asked them to make mountain jackets out of toilet seat fabric, Aaron Feuerstein didn't laugh. He saw a lifeline. The engineers at Malden Mills went to work. They took polyester fibers, which are basically long strings of plastic derived from petroleum, and they did something new. They knitted them into a dense fabric, and then they brushed it with wire brushes. This brushing process broke the loops of the fabric, creating thousands of tiny pockets. In physics, air is the best insulator. By trapping air in these tiny pockets, the fabric kept body heat in, but, and this is the magic part, it allowed moisture to pass through. They created a fabric that breathed. They needed a name. They wanted it to sound soft, luxurious, and natural. They thought of the chinchilla, the softest animal in the Andes Mountains. So they combined synthetic and chinchilla. Chinchilla was born. The first batch of chinchilla fleece hit the market and it changed everything. But there was a catch. It was expensive. And honestly, it still looked a bit weird. To hide the fact that it was basically plastic, Patagonia decided to lean into the artificial nature of it. They didn't dye it brown or gray like wool. They dyed it bright teal. Magenta, electric blue, neon yellow. It was the 1980s. Subtlety was dead. Suddenly, climbers didn't look like rugged survivalists anymore. They looked like fluorescent highlighters, and the world loved it. The snap tee pullover became an icon. It wasn't just gear, it was a statement. It said, "I am modern, I am athletic, I embrace technology." But here is the business decision that legitimately changed the course of fashion history. Malden Mills, who later rebranded the fabric as Polartec, and Patagonia made a choice. They had invented a miracle fabric. They could have patented it. They could have kept it exclusively for themselves and made billions. But they didn't. Yvon Chouinard and Aaron Feuerstein decided not to patent the fleece manufacturing process. They wanted the world to move away from heavy, water-absorbing materials. They wanted this to be the new standard. And the floodgates opened. The North Face, Columbia, LL, Bean, Land's End, and eventually the Gap and Old Navy. Everyone started making fleece. It went from a niche climbing product to something your grandmother bought at the mall. By the early 90s, fleece was everywhere. It was the fabric of the decade. But Yvon Chouinard had a problem, a moral one. He looked at his company, Patagonia, and realized he was a hypocrite. He was an environmentalist, giving money to save rivers and forests. But his best-selling product was made from polyester. And what is polyester? It's oil. It is a petroleum product. Every time he sold a jacket, he was dependent on the oil and gas industry. He demanded a solution. He asked his team, "Is there any other source of polyester?" At that time, recycling wasn't really a thing. Sure, people recycled aluminum cans, But plastic? Plastic just went to the landfill. But the chemistry of a plastic soda bottle, polyethylene terephthalate or PET, is almost identical to the chemistry of a polyester shirt. In 1993, Patagonia did something unheard of. They figured out how to take green plastic soda bottles, melt them down into a goo, spin that goo into a thread, and weave that thread into a jacket. It was the first time in history that outdoor clothing was made from post-consumer garbage. And here is a fun fact for you: cocktail parties. Do you remember how early fleece jackets were almost always a weird, murky shade of green? That wasn't a fashion choice. That was because the plastic bottles they were recycling were 7-Up and Sprite bottles. They couldn't get the green color out of the plastic mix. Instead of hiding it, they marketed it. That ugly green color became a badge of honor. It signaled to the world, I care about the planet. Fleece had evolved from a survival tool to a moral compass. Fast forward to the 2010s. The narrative of fleece takes a sharp, weird turn. We leave the mountains of Yosemite and travel to the concrete canyons of Wall Street and Silicon Valley. Walk into a Goldman Sachs office or a venture capital firm in San Francisco, and what do you see? You don't see suits. The suit is dead. The tie is extinct. Instead, you see an army of men wearing dress shirts, slacks, and a sleeveless fleece vest, usually branded with a company logo like JP Morgan or Sequoia Capital. This is the Midtown Uniform. How did a piece of climbing gear become the official dress code of capitalism? It comes down to office climate control. Modern skyscrapers are kept freezing cold to protect the servers and keep employees awake. A suit jacket is restrictive. You can't type aggressively or gesture wildly in a meeting. But a fleece vest, it keeps your core warm. It leaves your arms free. It is comfortable. It is the tactical gear of the white-collar worker. It also became a tribal signal. In the finance world, getting the branded vest was like earning your stripes. There is an entire Instagram account called Midtown Uniform, dedicated just to spotting these guys. The fleece vest became a symbol of status, but a very specific kind of status. I make a lot of money, but I'm too busy to care about fashion. The humble fabric of the dirtbag climber had been fully gentrified. But fashion is a circle. Just when fleece became uncool and associated with finance bros and dads, the youth took it back. Enter Gorpcore. If you haven't heard this term, it comes from the acronym GORP. Good old raisins and peanuts. It's the trail mix hikers eat. Around 2017, street fashion shifted. Suddenly, wearing Supreme hoodies wasn't enough. The cool kids in New York, London, and Tokyo wanted to look like they could survive an apocalypse. They wanted $700 Arcris cells and vintage Patagonia fleeces. Designers like Virgil Abloh and brands like Gucci started collaborating with the North Face. A fleece jacket that cost $100 in the 90s was suddenly being sold for $1,500 with a luxury logo slapped on it. Why? It's the irony. In a world that feels chaotic and digital, wearing survival gear feels protective. It's cozy. It's safe. Even if the only mountain you are climbing is the stairs to the subway, the fleece makes you feel ready for anything. But we cannot end this story without talking about the dark side. And it is a very dark side. Remember how excited we were about the plastic bottles? Trash into treasure. Save the planet. Well, it turns out we might have made a huge mistake. A few years ago, marine biologists started noticing something disturbing in the oceans. They found microscopic pieces of plastic inside fish, inside plankton, and eventually inside human blood. They traced a huge percentage of this plastic back to one source: synthetic clothing. Here is the problem. Fleece is a loose fabric. It's brushed. That's what makes it soft. But because it's loose, it is fragile. Every time you throw your fleece jacket into the washing machine, The churning water breaks off tiny microscopic synthetic fibers. According to a study by the University of Plymouth, a single wash load can release up to 700,000 microscopic plastic fibers. These fibers are too small for wastewater treatment plants to catch. They flow straight into the rivers, then into the oceans. Plankton eat them. Small fish eat the plankton, big fish eat the small fish. And then we eat the tuna sandwich. We are literally eating our own clothes. The irony is crushing. The fabric that was championed by environmentalists, the fabric that was made from recycled bottles to save the earth, is now one of the biggest contributors to marine pollution. So, where does that leave us? Should we burn our fleece jackets? Should we go back to itchy wool? Not necessarily. The industry is scrambling for a solution. Engineers are now developing biofleece. Companies like Polartec are working on plant-based synthetics that degrade in seawater. They are inventing new weaving techniques that prevent shedding. There are also simple solutions like washing bags that catch the fibers before they go down the drain. The technology is catching up, but it's a race against time. So, stop for a second and look at that jacket again. It's not just a piece of clothing. It is a history lesson woven into plastic threads. It is a story of human ingenuity, how we looked at a toilet seat cover and saw a mountain survival tool. It is a story of business ethics, how a company chose to share a patent to change the world. It is a story of culture, how a symbol of rebellion became a symbol of corporate conformity and then a symbol of high fashion. And it is a warning. It reminds us that every solution creates new problems, that there is no such thing as a perfect material. But despite the flaws, despite the static electricity, and despite the finance bro memes, we aren't going to stop wearing it. Because at the end of the day, humans are simple creatures. We just want to feel safe. We want to feel warm. We want to feel fuzzy. And until they invent a force field, fleece is the closest thing we have to a warm hug on a cold day. This was Behind the Seams. If you are wearing fleece right now, hit that like button. If you are wearing itchy wool, hit subscribe and maybe go buy some lotion. See you in the next one.